The festive 50s, the frivolous 50s, even the fighting 50s, call it what you will, for the cameraman of Pathe News, the first complete decade following the Second World War provided a fascinating mixture of stories and reports. When the decade began, there was no television news. The cinema newsreels provided the sole window on the world, and what a world it was. Lifestyle, music, fashion, design was a 50s buzzword. The teenager was invented. Rock and roll soon followed. For Britain, it was the new Elizabethan age. For much of the rest of the world, it was the age of the Cold War, as the two superpowers fought out their ideologies. In Britain, though, the decade was set on the road by a lavish festival, set up on the south bank of the Thames. It was designed to give the people a pat on the back, or so the government, who financed the project, liked to proclaim.
London's South Bank exhibition is ready to show the world what Britain can do. 100 years ago, our engineering triumphs amazed overseas visitors to the great exhibition, of which this is a model. Today, in the Dome of Discovery and the other structures, we show the most modern building wonders. Vast, light, airy units without supporting columns to waste space. We've done wonders since the war. Now we're blowing our own trumpet for a change. And of all our triumphs, the exhibition is not the least, with its 100-ton, 300-foot skylon calling the world to see Britain this festival year. Now over to Battersea, where the fun fair's opened just in time for the holidays. It's full of horrors like the octopus, 2 minutes of whirling bliss and heaven help your tummy. It's amazing how they lap it up. Business is soaring. Already they're turning thousands away. The queues are so long you need a taxi to take your proper place. 80,000 got in, and they report there's plenty of fun at the fun fair. It's a sellout for the paper boys as a general election suddenly looms in sight. Intelligent anticipation or inspired guess, it focuses attention on the only man who knows the answer, and there's excitement as Mr. Attlee leaves number 10. Then, with a hard winter ahead and threat of a split in his party, the Premier makes this dramatic broadcast announcement.
King has been pleased to signify his acceptance of my recommendation that His Majesty should proclaim the dissolution of Parliament on Friday, the 5th of October. In accordance with the provisions of the Representation of the People Act, polling day will fall on Thursday, the 25th of October.
18 months ago, Labour was returned with a bare majority. Election night is recalled by these excited scenes, which may well be eclipsed on the night of October the 25th. Yesterday, he was among them at Sandringham. King to the rest of England and the Empire, but to them the squire, the kindly man who passed among them. And then...
This is London. It is with the greatest sorrow that we make the following announcement. It was announced from Sandringham at 10:45 today, February the 6th, 1952, that the King, who retired to rest last night in his usual health, passed peacefully away in his sleep early this morning.
The heart of the nation stops. High over Big Ben, the flag is low as the news spreads. The King is dead. Swift from the press, the news flows to the farthest corners of our island. In our hearts we feel, this cannot be. In Downing Street, the people gather, as always in time of trouble, as the Premier leaves to meet Parliament. The King is dead, but there is much to do, for government must continue. And now the King passes from our midst. Now the King who denied his people no duty that they asked or imposed, who was their most faithful, constant, and diligent servant, takes his rest, and Britain mourns. Of George VI, it will be written, This was a king his people loved.
I here present unto you Queen Elizabeth, your undoubted queen. Wherefore all you who are come this day to do your homage and service, are you willing to do the same?
From Kathmandu, capital of Nepal, come first pictures of the city's preparations to welcome back the conquerors of Mount Everest. This mighty achievement has a particular significance for these people, for it was Sherpa Tenzing, the most famous of their porters, who, with New Zealander Edmund Hillary, triumphed in the final assault. Sherpas move further up the mountain to greet Hillary and Tenzing. Dwarfed by the mighty Himalayas, they begin the journey to Kathmandu. The two conquerors lead the triumphant procession. The crowds swell in the capital as the news spreads that the heroes have returned. Thousands join in the jubilant procession, shouting and singing their praises. Following the great parade comes a small convoy of vehicles carrying the mountaineers. To the men who first set foot upon the summit of Everest go the congratulations of all. But to their leader, Colonel Hunt, who stood back that victory might be the privilege of others, goes the admiration of the whole world.
The conquest of Everest was a welcome distraction from some of the less inspiring deeds emerging from the protagonists in the Cold War. When communist troops invaded South Korea at the very start of the decade, it looked for a time as though the world was set for yet another world war. British troops were in action in Korea and also at Suez.
The Suez Canal, never far from the news in its 87 years of history, hits the headlines like a bombshell when, without a hint of warning, Egypt's Premier, Colonel Nasser, announces that his country is taking it over. The profit is to be used to complete the Aswan Dam, the huge project from which Britain and America recently withdrew their offers of financial aid. 2 years ago, Britain agreed to withdraw her troops. The canal would become Egypt's property in 1968. Mr. Anthony Head signed for Britain, Nasser for Egypt. Now, Nasser tears the agreement up. The canal, he says, is nationalized forthwith. Shareholders will be paid current stock exchange prices. The £36 million annual profit will become Egyptian revenue.
Unit after unit comes ashore to build up the Allied strength. As well as fighting troops, there are many specialists. For one aim of the Allied action is to safeguard the canal, and the Egyptians have sunk several ships in the channel in an attempt to make it unusable. Allied aircraft were able to frustrate this plan to some extent by sinking the block ships before they could be towed into their most effective positions. Most of the land battle consists of clearing out nests of snipers. After the ceasefire, Allied troops are ordered not to shoot unless they are attacked, and the bulk of the Egyptian population show little desire to attack anybody. No one knows how many of these civilians are soldiers who have thrown away their weapons and uniforms, or, more dangerously, have abandoned their uniforms and kept their weapons. Meanwhile, the Allied units are able to maintain order while they wait for the promised United Nations force to take the task off their hands. French troops play their part alongside their British colleagues in an operation which Sir Anthony Eden has called a military feat unparalleled in history.
Close on the heels of discussions of Far East strategy by Generals MacArthur and Bradley comes news that communist troops have invaded southern Korea. In swift response, President Truman has ordered United States Sea and Air Forces to give cover and support to the South Korean troops of President Sigmund Rhee, who is here being greeted by General MacArthur in Tokyo. United States action is explained as implementing the Security Council's resolution. In Seoul, not 2 years ago, the new Republic of South Korea was proclaimed, but political independence was the beginning instead of the end of trouble. From industrial northern Korea, agitators infiltrated to spread communism, ideas which only too easily took root among the 20 million inhabitants of southern Korea, most of them peasants. While the world wondered, communism marched again.
A mighty fleet steams off Korea. On board, men are busy. It's good to be busy when you're waiting, and a dirty rifle can mean death. They're passing out ammunition now. Something big's about to break. While the rest of the world fears the collapse of the United Nations front in Korea, MacArthur is striking back at the very heart of the enemy. Landing craft leave with storm troops to capture Walmy Island, key to Incheon, port of Seoul. With a 30-foot tide, it's a split-second timetable. Beneath British and American guns, the commandos race for shore. Down the scramble nets as quick as you can, just like D-Day. The Marines are in. High behind the smoke, the flag flies over Walmy Island, and the main force heads for the mainland. It's safe now. The ships can close in on the crest of the tide. And so the biggest landing since D-Day races to its successful climax. Planned and mounted in secrecy, whilst the cause on land seemed lost. The invasion to end the war quickly is pulled off. The daring trap is sprung. The rest is time. On the south front, the Argyll and Sutherland switch to the offensive as the pincers start to close. And tough South Koreans, tired after months of hard fighting, grin as the tide turns. Nearby, on Daegu Airfield, Australian Mustangs bomb up to spearhead the breakout. From some deep-hidden source, exhausted men find the little extra that makes a man. And they turn to rend the aggressor. enemy proves stubborn, they call up the Air Force. And from Daegu Airfield, the Australians roar into the air. There's a camera on one of them, and from air and ground, we bring you the most dramatic air attack pictures of the war. As the guns are silenced throughout Indochina, the exchange of prisoners of war begins. Arthur Hunt on the left and Trooper Edward O'Donnell are among the first Britishers released. O'Donnell's home is in St Helens, Lancashire. Weston-super-Mare is Hunt's hometown. A Lance Corporal in the Gloucesters, he was captured during the Imjin battle. Soon he will be back in Britain. But now in Panmunjom, talks begin to bring peace to Korea, which would bring them all home again. Leaders of the communist world meet in Warsaw to sign the treaty which is their answer to NATO. The Soviet Premier Bulganin is prominent on the platform when the delegates show themselves to Warsaw's thousands. China's Defense Minister Peng Dehuai and Russia's General Zhukov are there too, clapping and being clapped. Polish Premier Sorankiewicz tells of the new military and political treaty while General Peng listens. China is not actually a member of this communist NATO, and Eastern Germany is left out for the time being like an ace up the sleeve. An ace to be played with caution, for the people of East Europe have long memories of German behavior. The communists declare they seek nothing but peaceful coexistence. Deeds, not words, will show whether the communist leaders are sincere. While being ready to examine any practical overtures the East may make, the West must at all times maintain its own strength as long as the possibility of aggression exists. Only thus can we safeguard that peace for which the peoples of the world are longing.
Into Portsmouth Harbour steams the Soviet cruiser Orjonikidze, bearing Prime Minister Nikolai Bulganin and Party Secretary Nikita Khrushchev. It's the first time Russia's leaders have visited Britain since the Soviet state was founded 39 years ago. Bulganin and Khrushchev stand with the cruiser's captain as the hawsers are pulled ashore and the big warship comes to rest. The Russian leaders walk down the red-carpeted gangplank, while a guard of honor from HMS Victory presents arms. As they step ashore, the band strikes up. Bulganin and Khrushchev stand bareheaded. At Victoria, embassy officials and their wives are waiting with Sir Anthony Eden and members of his government to welcome the Russian guests. The train is still moving as the Soviet Premier steps onto the platform to be greeted by Sir Anthony Eden. Khrushchev is close behind him.
During the Orjonikidze's visit, her captain reported a frogman had been seen alongside. The British Navy denied it. But 11 days later, the British press were talking about Commander Crabbe. He was missing, reported killed, while testing new underwater equipment. The explanation seemed thin and public opinion was not satisfied. There were questions in the House. Labour leaders were saying, "We may have quarrelled with our guests at dinner, but at least we didn't search their luggage." Russia sent a note of protest. Britain sent a note of apology, and Sir Anthony Eden told the House, what was done without the authority or the knowledge of Her Majesty's ministers. Appropriate disciplinary steps are being taken. He would say no more, on the grounds that certain things are the responsibility of the Prime Minister himself, which the House and the world took to mean the Secret Service. Rushed out of Budapest in the last hours before the Russians took control, these pictures make you an eyewitness of Hungary's brief but tragic civil war. This is how it all started, with a peaceful students' demonstration 100,000 strong. They carried pro-communist banners. No one spoke of rebellion. All they asked was greater democracy within the present regime, reforms on the Polish pattern. There was no hint here of the bitter days to come. It looked more like a meeting in Hyde Park, a holiday atmosphere with good temper taking the edge from strong opinions. Hungarians fraternized with Russian troops. But meanwhile on the radio, Party Secretary Gero was describing the demonstrators as rabble, and the word was like a burning match in a powder barrel. The first clashes were between the demonstrators and the hated secret police. Budapest workers and students, armed by sympathetic soldiers, began rounding up any they could catch. Like wildfire, the news spread through the city that police had been firing on the crowds in Stalin Square. Hungarian army units rushed to the square to restore order, and for a while nobody could tell who was fighting whom. But as the rising took shape, the government called in Russian tanks, and battle was joined. All the pent-up emotions of a decade, all the hatred of Russian interference flared up at once. Budapest became a battleground. After a grim battle, the headquarters of the AVO, the secret police, was captured by the insurgents. The victors made great bonfires of secret police dossiers, propaganda literature and red flags beside the bodies of the vanquished. At last, the tide was turning. The rebels were gaining the upper hand. The government were negotiating with the Kremlin for the withdrawal of Russian troops. A wave of national pride ran through the capital. But the triumph was short-lived. While Budapest was still burying its dead, the shocked world learned that the Russians had denounced Nagy's government, set up one of their own, and begun to occupy Hungary in its name. Hungary's cup of bitterness has not yet been emptied, but her spirit cannot die.
Away from the struggles of Eastern Europe, Britain was engaged on a very different kind of battle, the attempts to bring the country into the modern era. New cars, new fashion, new technology, all featured in the 50s, as society began to adapt to the new age of comparative prosperity. "You've never had it so good," was the slogan, and for millions it was true. The issues that caught the imagination now weren't exactly world-shattering. Take this row over the length of a lady's hemline.
Remember these, all the rage in 1927, and if Christian Dior has his way, they'll soon be back. Short but very sweet, we thought them 26 years ago. If they do return, here is roughly what to expect. Top-flight fashion model Susan Hook gives Pathe News a preview of the new style. Now for some opinions about this fashion bombshell. Here's one from across the Atlantic.
Well, I think that women are here to stay, and the short skirts show off some of their finer points.
Oh, it's much nicer when the winds blow with short skirts.
I just don't think they're very nice at all. I hope they don't come in, and personally I don't want to wear them.
Thank you.
I work in the cotton mills in Lancashire, and I don't think that the short skirts are good for the people that live in Lancashire, because it makes us short of work. And therefore, the longer the skirts and the more material, the more work there'll be for the Lancashire people. Short skirts are better than long ones, because when you're out on a wet day, they don't get so wet as the long skirts.
Oh, lovely grub.
My dear, they're putting mink on simply everything these days. Even Mr. Teasy Weezy is left speechless by this outfit. The name? Love Nest. The price? Near 100 guineas. Associated British starlet Maya Kumani models a baby doll set. Rather cheaper this one, 60 guineas. Just a job to keep you warm in those long winter nights. Well, bits of you anyway. You still find 60 guineas a little too expensive? Never mind, the show caters for all purses. The next creation is practically given away at 50 guineas. It's called First Night. The London headquarters of the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents is a permanent training centre in road safety. It's an appropriate place for an introduction of the new penny edition of the Highway Code. The Minister of Transport and Civil Aviation, Mr. John Boyd Carpenter, speaks on road safety and the Highway Code.
Last year, nearly 250,000 of us were hurt on the roads. Ordinary people going about their ordinary jobs like you and me. Over 5,000 people who started out one morning without any feeling of danger were killed. Most of the people who were hurt or killed needn't have been. That's why the Highway Code is well worth reading. By reading it carefully and by following the sensible, practical advice which it gives, we can save somebody, perhaps ourselves, from being maimed or killed.
The event of the year of the motoring enthusiast, whether he can afford a new car or not, the Motor Show at Earl's Court. This year, there are plenty of new ideas out of old stables, including the Conquest, Daimler's first two-seater drop-head coupe. The MG Magnet, 1.5 litre, is very cleverly displayed. And here's the Austin A105, bigger sister of the A90. This is the first Austin model to have two-pedal control. And on the Jaguar stand, the beautifully proportioned Mark 8, which is roomier than you'd think. Rover present the shape of things to come in their T3 gas turbine. Not yet in production, of course, but proof that Britain is taking the lead in this revolutionary development. The Singer Gazelle is closely related to its stable companions, the Hillman Minx and Sunbeam Rapier. From America comes the Buick Centurion, a very opulent-looking car, at present for display only. The makers don't even hint at a price. It has everything, except oddly enough a steering column. The steering is remote control. You can buy the Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud with a fitted radio telephone and coffee machine. What are you waiting for? Bring out your checkbooks. It's goodbye to the old clangers as London's last tram week comes to an end, and they're doing good work to the end. Fares taken on this one go to help the Infantile Paralysis Fund. And here's Ethel Revenell, feathers and all, ready to knock 'em in the Old Kent Road in a grand cause. But here's the last tram just arriving from Woolwich at the New Cross Depot. It's 91 years since London got her first tram, so they've had a pretty good run for London's money. Well, you've missed the last number 40 for the last time. Great-grandpa will tell you there's not much you can do in the back seat of a Shara you couldn't do on the old trams. They had a wonderful sway about them. Bristol Central Exchange began a telephone revolution and had a royal visit on the same day. A red-letter day indeed. The new system is called subscriber trunk dialing. By way of contrast, the Queen saw old-time phones, which you wound to call the operator, and also a picture of a typical exchange, Hoban, of 50 years ago. Here, a Swedish instrument among others of the pioneering age. One model, the carbon transmitter of Black, 1879. A far cry from the latest model, soon available in 7 different colors. Great Britain will eventually be linked by the dial we now use for local calls. The Postmaster General invited Her Majesty to make the first STD call to Edinburgh, and telephone history was made.
The Lord Provost of Edinburgh speaking.
This is the Queen speaking from Bristol. Good afternoon, Lord Provost.
Good afternoon, Your Majesty. May I, with humble duty, offer you the loyal greetings of the citizens of Edinburgh.
Thank you. And would you, Lord Provost, please convey my greetings to them? I'm always interested in any development which brings my people closer together. In a few moments, Bristol subscribers will be able to make trunk calls by merely dialing the right number up to a distance of some 300 miles. In time, the whole United Kingdom will enjoy the advantages of this new service which the Post Office has introduced.
May I express my gratitude to Your Majesty for the honor which you have done to me and to Scotland in making the first call in this new service to me.
Thank you. Goodbye, Lord Provost.
Goodbye, Your Majesty.
Marilyn Monroe and her new husband, playwright Arthur Miller, at least managed to get married secretly. But now the press catch up with them on the Miller farm in Roxbury, Connecticut. Of course, Marilyn's quite accustomed to being a public institution by now. And if Arthur isn't, he'll have plenty of chance to learn.
American Billy Graham faces a battery of press cameras as, with his young wife Ruth, he comes to Britain on board the luxury liner SS United States. Hailed as the most potent evangelist in American history, Graham, a 35-year-old ex-baseball player, spoke to crowds numbering 2 million last year in the States, as well as writing a daily newspaper column and broadcasting regularly to Europe and America. Later at Waterloo Station, crowds of ardent evangelists gather to welcome Graham, who has booked the giant Haringey Arena for his meetings. The mission will cost £100,000. The crowd, which includes about 4,000 women, join in hymn singing led by one of Graham's youthful followers. At long last, the Gospelers' train arrives. Immediately, the crowd stampede the barriers, thrusting police and railway staff aside to catch a glimpse of the evangelist. The pressure of the great throng prevents Graham from getting into a taxi, so with members of his staff acting as a bodyguard, he attempts to walk to the other end of the platform. Several women faint in the crush. After 20 minutes, Graham manages to climb into a car to drive to his hotel. Disclaiming that he is either an intellectual or a theologian, Graham says, "It is not I who draw the crowds, it is God." Billy Graham has spoken to more than 1.5 million people during his 3 months campaign. Now he sums up his crusade.
Our political and military leaders have said repeatedly they do not know the answer to the present world dilemma. This uncertainty is beginning to penetrate to the man on the street. The average man must turn somewhere. He must have some faith and hope to hold on to. Thousands are turning to God and to finding peace, security, happiness, and joy in this age of uncertainty and confusion.
As the massed choirs sing a version of the Lord's Prayer, hundreds come forward to declare that they have accepted Christ. Billy Graham and his team have made their contribution towards filling the churches of Britain, which have long been almost empty. The immigration boom touched new heights in a novel way. About 80 people made history at London Airport on the first flight of the great airlift inaugurated by the Canadian government. From Heathrow and Prestwick, 25,000 will fly to begin a new life in the Dominion. The fare, £71.10, about half the normal cost. Canada can't have too many good type people from Great Britain. Business is booming too at Australia House. Especially, they tell us, since Suez and the rent bill made thousands doubtful about the future. Even before that, enterprising folk were looking beyond the shores of Britain. It's in the blood. People from this island have always gone out to put the imprint of freedom upon far-off lands. And no less than Canada, Australia says welcome to skilled men not afraid to work. They feel crowded at home, the men and women who are emigrating. They're tired of the sweat and grind, sometimes in rather grim houses. And though there's little unemployment, the competition's terrific. Promotion's a long way off. Then the taxation. Not much pay left after income tax, purchase tax, beer tax, tax this, tax that. The emigration ship looks like a passport to a land of promise. All going aboard must have felt that way. They're useful people who are emigrating. No question of unloading the riffraff. Australia, Canada, New Zealand and the rest are getting best quality men and women. And it's good luck we wish all of them. They're another proof that the race has bred true. But here at home, there'll be adventure too in ever-improving conditions with housing worthy of the nation that pioneers atomic industry in which Britain leads. What opportunity for men who seek their adventure in new science. Today, all industry challenges men of spirit and enterprise. Automation, if we control it properly, will double our standard of life in 25 years. Britain's a good country. The inviting sea that beckons some abroad relaxes millions every year. On everybody's doorstep, there's sport of the highest standard in the world. We taught it to the world. And if they sometimes match us at these games, it's all in the day's fun. The men who emigrate and those who stay are all sons of the motherland, Great Britain, that always did and always will breed a race second to none in the world.
The Britain is Best Brigade got a big boost in the 50s from some of the country's sporting achievements. Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. Our racing drivers monopolised the World Championships, though sadly the decade was marred by the Manchester United air crash in Munich. The international tennis scene was dominated by the Americans and Australians, and as far as women's tennis was concerned, by one girl, tiny but terrific.
Now it's Maureen Connolly, or Little Mo, serving in the women's singles finals. 17-year-old Little Mo, champion of America, has captured the world's admiration. Her opponent is Louise Brough, 3 times champion at Wimbledon. She's the only one to beat Little Mo since she won the American title last year. Maureen wins the first set, 7-5. "17,000 watch as Louise Brough serves from the far end. So far, 50 spectators have collapsed under the heat. It's near the end now. Maureen places one wide of Louise Brough and they both wait for the verdict. That would have been victory to Little Mo, but the linesman ruled it out and they resume play. Maureen Connolly serves with a world title within her grasp. She's forcing Miss Brough all over the court. Louise nets, and Maureen Connolly becomes champion at her first Wimbledon appearance. Little Mo's overcome. Fibrositis threatened to put her out of it. But now the Duchess of Kent hands her the trophy, and it looks as though it'll be a long time before anyone takes it away from her.
"25-year-old Roger Bannister, third from the left, gets away at the Iffley Ground, Oxford, for the race of his life. For years, he has dreamed of becoming the first man to run the mile in less than 4 minutes, and now, with Chris Brasher setting the pace in front, he's decided that this is the right moment. Bannister's old friend and rival, Chris Chataway, is in third place, waiting his time to take over as pacer. After 2.5 laps, Brasher gives way to Chataway. Bannister, a superb tactician, has suffered some criticism in the past for adopting his own rather unorthodox training methods, but they're paying dividends now. Despite the slight wind, he's clocking great time. Any moment now and we'll see the famous Bannister burst. And here he comes. Bannister goes streaking forward with about 250 yards to the tapes. Just look at his action as his long legs carry him nearer that world record. And Bannister has done it. Though he's out on his feet, his coach and team manager tell him he's achieved his ambition. The mile in 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds. A magnificent win for Great Britain.
Jockey Dick Francis is pushing Devon Lock ahead inch by inch. Eagle Lodge is beginning to tire, but there's still plenty of power in the Royal Horse. And now it's ESB taking up the challenge as Eagle Lodge drops back. But Devon Lock's going strongly at jump 29, and he looks to the crowd as though a royal win's a certainty. Into the final straight with victory in sight for Devon Lock. He's clear away from ESB and Gentle Moyer. Only 40 yards to go. Devon Lock can't lose. But he slipped. He's down. ESB streaks past to win by 10 lengths, with Gentle Moyer second and Royal Tan third. Devon Lock's on his feet again, but it's too late. The most tragic defeat in Grand National history. Dick Francis walks off the track in tears, a bitterly disappointed man, while Devon Lock is led away. No one is more astonished than ESB's jockey, D.V. Dick, to find himself the victor. Devon Lock had me stone cold, he says. I was a terribly lucky winner.
But he rode a fine race, and trainer Fred Rimmel is there to congratulate him with own nemesis Leonard Carver. So ends the most sensational Grand National Aintree has ever seen. On the fringe of a Munich airport lies the wreckage of an airliner, still smouldering from a crash in which 21 people were killed. Tragedy enough at any time. But in that plane were a group of young men who were almost the personal friends of millions. Manchester United, the finest soccer team Britain has produced since the war. And 7 of them died in the crash. 10 others, as well as their famous manager, Matt Busby, were injured. Some so seriously that their lives hung in the balance. Busby's babes, as they were affectionately called, were on their way home from Belgrade when the disaster struck. They were on top of the world. Their 3-goal draw with Yugoslavia's Red Star team had put them through to the European Cup semi-finals. They had high hopes of the English FA Cup. Now those hopes are snuffed out, like the lives of 7 of their finest players. 3 days before, the press had carried pictures of a confident team leaving for Belgrade. Pictures which remind us that with them were 8 of the North's finest sporting journalists who would never see home again. Remember Matt Busby leading his babes onto the Wembley turf for the cup final that brilliant day last spring? Roger Byrne, in the plain shirt, skippered them against Aston Villa. United were already league champions, and that day they came within an ace of bringing off the double. Here's Manchester winger John Berry beating his man and passing to Tommy Taylor. A fine pair, that. Manchester's only goal came from a corner which Duncan Edwards fed to Tommy Taylor for a magnificent header into the top of the net. Aston Villa won by a 1-goal margin. But Busby's babes had nothing to be ashamed of. They had lost to the only side in history to win the FA Cup 7 times. Manchester, from the moment the news came through, was a city in mourning. Newspapers sold as fast as they could be printed. It was as though every family in a city of 750,000 people had suffered a personal loss, and so indeed they had. At Old Trafford, the saddest football ground in the world, the flags flew at half-mast. And on hundreds of other football grounds, other flags were being dipped in sympathy. For this disaster is perhaps the most tragic single blow British sport has ever suffered. Stand by for a game of golf with a difference. Yes, Bob Hope is here, and with him the old groaner himself, Bing Crosby, to play an America versus Britain match. Before the start, the usual Bing-Bob backchat.
Wait, just a minute. Are you in form for today? Oh, I'm in fine shape. I've had my second cup of tea with a dash of adrenaline, and I'm ready.
I was looking at you, and I think you better get home. You're starting to look like your passport
Isn't
picture.
that something?
Yes.
I look like Bela Lugosi with Peter Lorre's head, don't I? Huh? You should see my passport picture.
Yeah?
You know how most passport pictures you look like you're looking through a porthole?
Yeah.
Mine looks like I'm sick and can't get the porthole open.
Oh, how grim. I say, now listen.
Hey, it's wonderful. We ought to get these, our competitors in here, don't
Yes,
you
let's
think?
get Don and Ted
There's
in
a
here.
couple of unknowns.
Here's Ted Ray. Fine English comic who's on his way to Korea tomorrow.
Thank you
folks.
very
Give him a
much.
hand. He's going to Korea to entertain.
And here is Mr. Donald Piers. This is Crosby with tea right here. Come in.
Hello!
What is it? It's a shady nook?
That's right.
Let's go.
Well, are we going to beat these boys, you think, Donald?
I think so.
I think you are. I'm not.
Isn't this wonderful, though, being here in California? I just love it. Look at that sky. This is the only place in the world where you can get 4 seasons in one day. I want to tell you that. This is divine. We better hurry. It'll be snowing before the 3rd hole, you know. Let's move on, old boy.
Before a crowd of nearly 10,000, the match held at the Temple Golf Club Maidenhead begins. Donald Piers drives off, and his wisecracking partner Ted Ray seems to approve, but Bing's taking no chances. Bob says Ted Ray could do with driving lessons, but here's Bing having a bash. Heaven and the crowd know where it went. Can you see it, Bob? Crosby takes cover as the game warms up. The crowd make it look like a game of rugger, not golf. Caught hard and fast in the middle of a dense crowd of fans are the 2 crooners who look anything but rivals as they make their way to the next green. Nobody seems to worry much about the game itself. They only want to see the stars. The crowd stops breathing and Bob drives off again. 8 of the holes have been abandoned because of the time taken to force a way through the crowd. Despite the fact that it's been more like an assault course than a golf course, the 4 stars are still in terrific form and really giving the crowd their money's worth. All the proceeds from the match will be given to the Variety Club of Great Britain, who in turn will hand it into the funds of the National Playing Fields Association. By the way, if you want to know which team won the match, it was Donald Piers and Ted Ray. So they say.
That kind of film star glamour was all the rage in the 50s. But these were also years when the young had spending power of their own for the first time. They began to spend money on clothes and records. Television was also beginning to take a hold, broadcasting pictures in the home that had until now been seen solely in the cinema. The coronation coverage had set the trend. Royal events were becoming open to all.
In flag-bedecked Monte Carlo Harbour, Prince Rainier boards his yacht to meet the US liner Constitution, bringing his bride, film star Grace Kelly, to Monaco. But a Frenchman gets in first with his welcome. The Mayor of Cannes, who brings flowers to the liner for the future princess of France's tiny neighbour, the pocket state of Monaco. Prince Rainier's yacht, the Deo Giovante, leaves the harbour, and so do other boats, from speedboats to dinghies. In the race for the liner, the prince is an also-ran. But even if he gets there last, he knows he's the winner in the end. The Deo Giovante moors alongside, and at last Grace Kelly steps onto Monegasque territory, followed by her most urgent luggage, only 20 pieces. The yacht moves away, accompanied by its official and unofficial escort. Every inch of the quayside is packed as the yacht approaches. It's just as well Monte Carlo Harbour is a natural amphitheatre. It might have been made for an occasion like this. The big moment arrives, for which the whole of Monaco has been waiting, and Grace Kelly steps ashore. Not forgetting Oliver the poodle, and of course the prince. Welcome in the approved tradition from 2 very small Monegasque. What a lovely hat, the crowds are shouting. But we want to see the lovely girl. That's better. The prince seems to feel safer when he's holding the lead. Outside the prince's palace, more crowds are waiting, as well as a substantial proportion of Monaco's army forming a guard of honor. Footnote: next time Grace appeared in public, it was without her hat.
Grâce Patricia, voulez-vous prendre pour légitime époux Régnier Louis-Henri Maxence Bertrand, ici présent, selon le rite de notre mère, la Sainte Église? Ego conjugum vos in matrimonium in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Oscar night in Hollywood, when the motion picture world names its top performers of the year and the greatest picture.
Ingrid Bergman got a big welcome, and Joe Louis, former heavyweight champ, a spectator tonight. Tony Curtis and his wife, Janet Leigh. It was all the police could do to keep a way clear for the star's entrance. Susan Hayward, unaware of it at this stage, got the award for Best Actress. On the stage were John Wayne and Irene Dunn, who named David Niven Best Actor of the Year. It was the first time the debonair Briton, favoured on both sides of the Atlantic, had won the top award, though he starred for 20 years. Awarded a special honorary Oscar for his playing in Gigi was veteran Maurice Chevalier, announced by Rosalind Russell. And by overwhelming vote, Gigi itself was declared the year's best picture. Dean Martin and Sophia Loren announced the names of...
Outside the church of St. Stephen, Capri, they're waiting for a well-known resident's wedding. And here's Gracie on the arm of her witness, while alongside walks husband-to-be Boris Alperovici. These exclusive pictures show Father Lembo performing the ceremony. A Bessarabian by birth, Boris first met Gracie when he went to repair her radio. For such a great star, it's a simple, quiet wedding. Now, our Gracie is Mrs. Alperovici. It's her third wedding and took a little over 5 minutes. Now Gracie and her Boris start their life together, and all who have reaped so much pleasure from her art will wish our Gracie all the happiness she so richly deserves. At Caxton Hall, London, it's a different affair altogether, as 19-year-old Elizabeth Taylor arrives for her wedding to Michael Wilding. Overboard went all the plans for a quiet wedding. Somehow the news leaked out. And here they are, 39-year-old Michael Wilding and his bride. Now there's no holding the huge crowd. Michael's rung the bell often with his British pictures, and he's one of our most popular screen stars. His romance with Elizabeth Taylor had all fans really excited. Now the Wildings are off to the continent for their honeymoon, if they can force their way through this crowd of well-wishers. You've only got to look and listen to be quite sure that all these young people have got hep. They're most definitely with it. This is a high-class joint. But everywhere, the cats have their own little places where they live the gospel that this is the age of the teenager.
Oh, love, why don't they understand this little word called love? Why don't they understand?
Youth 1958 with a lingo of its own. What's it got to say for itself?
This is us, see? We're today. If you don't dig us, shoot away some square joint to the rest of the creeps. Well, why not stick around and get with it?
From that club to Lady Lewisham's a far cry. But wait.
Lady Lewisham, what do you think about our teenagers?
I think they're splendid. And I'm delighted you asked me that question, because I sometimes think they get rather a raw deal.
Oh, why?
I've met very many teenagers up and down the country when I've been travelling around, and I've been always particularly struck by their enthusiasm about everything, by their new ideas. I like the idea that they want to wear gay clothes, and it is in this country ideas that we certainly need. And I think that after all, one must remember the extraordinary things that one's parents and grandparents did, all their latest crazes, which seem to us just as extraordinary now. I'm always very bored with people who say, oh, young people aren't what they were in my day.
The cats grab life with both hands and do their best to live it 100% 24 hours a day. Life lies before them. They've got vitality, hep, and they're certainly with it. And the best of luck. "20,000 film fans crowd Leicester Square to bursting point for the Royal Command film performance. And here come the stars. Lovely Yvonne De Carlo is first, followed by Petite Petula Clark. Gene Kelly is next on the list, and here's Douglas Fairbanks. But the man who gives the London Bobbies a battle with the crowds is, yes, Charlie Chaplin. Hollywood hero Rock Hudson leads charming Veronica Hurst into the star-packed foyer. Chatting together are two married couples, Mr. and Mrs. John Mills and the Oliviers. Another husband and wife, Robert Schuller and singing star Patrice Munsell. Perky little Joan Dowling is here with Harry Fowler, and behind the moustache is Richard Todd, also with his wife. The Chaplins renew acquaintance with blonde and beautiful Evelyn Keyes. Now the royal car arrives, and the crowd surges forward for a glimpse of Her Majesty, radiant and lovely in black and white satin. Princess Margaret is in black tulle. The Duke of Edinburgh follows them into the theatre. Reginald Bromhead, one of the organisers of this charity show, accompanies Her Majesty to the flower-decked royal box. Perhaps the greatest artist in the lavish stage show is the little man we still think of as Charlie. Star after star comes onto the stage and fills the great theatre with music and laughter. But now the performance is over and the curtains close for the last time.